Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more win-wins in life, then do we have the Gogiver Influencer Show for you. Today I'll be talking with John David Mann, the brilliant best-selling co-author along with Bob Burg of the Gogiver series of books, including the Gogiver Leader and a positively persuasive, value-adding new book, the Gogiver Influencer. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about how to get more out of life through giving to others. That, plus we'll talk about the importance of napping, Cleopatra and Solomon, alfalfa juice and hay juice, Sadaharu O, and what in the world trust and peach pancakes has to do with anything. So welcome back to the show, John. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready. It's always delightful to be here. Thank you. I'm glad to be visiting you in your new domicile, your new digs.
Thank you. Thank you. You are interview number one in our new digs. It's exciting. There's an energy to it. There's also, honestly, a little bit of a fear factor to it, as who knows what could come up. And I guess what you think about, you bring about. So what I think about is kind, gentle, easy, good, and fun interview today.
I'm good for that.
Excellent. So I want to dive into all things dog, but before we do that, can you give us a brief description of John David Mann 101?
John David Mann 101. I came into this world as a child. People have asked me, when did you first decide to become a writer? And my answer is always never, because I never actually had that moment where I sat down and said, this is what I want to do.
You were conscripted.
I was conscripted by conspiracy of the universe around me, I guess. I started out in life as a classical musician. I played the cello. I'm a composer. Mm-hmm. My father was a conductor and a musicologist, and my whole family were musical. So that's what I did. That was my career initially. As a high schooler, I dropped out of high school, and with some friends, we started our own high school. So I was kind of in education. I got involved in business and marketing. I've done a lot of different things, and typically they didn't start out by my saying, I think this is what I'll do. Mm-hmm. It's more just kind of following where the wind goes and where my interests go and where my passion and curiosity goes. And all along the way, I've been involved in editing other people's stuff. And over the years, editing other people's stuff turned into editing Bob Burg stuff. And one day, Bob tapped me on the shoulder and said, listen, I want to co-author a book with you. Not my book that you edit, but a book we write together. It's like half you, half me. Throw Bob and John in a barrel, mix them up and see what comes out. And that was The Gogiver, which came out 10 years ago. And since then, I've written about 24 books, and that's become my career at the moment. So I partner with fascinating people to write books that engage me and hopefully have an impact on people's lives.
As they certainly do, and that is a mighty woohoo!
Yes.
So let's see, where do we even go with this? As the winds take you, how do the winds take you to the influencer?
So we wrote The Gogiver, as you know. And that was Bob's idea. It was, and we kind of hatched it and grew it together, and it became this book.
I guess I should pause you. Who came up with Pinder's paradox?
I cannot tell a lie. That was me. Well, it's funny. All the elements of The Gogiver, we know with clarity. Bob thought of this. John thought of that. And then there are places where we're not sure who started the sentence and who finished it. So by and large, I'm the guy at the keyboard. I'm the writer. Bob can be a very fine writer too. He's written 2 books, a number of books of his own that have done very, very well. But I generally do the writing, and we bounce everything back and forth. So it's really an amalgam of the two of us. Pindar's paradox, as you mentioned, is simply that the more you give, the more you have. It's the opposite of the core principle of classic economics, which is called the dismal science, because it is the science of depletion. The depletion of resources. If I have 10 cords of wood and I give you 5 cords, now I only have 5 left. So every act of giving depletes me in classic economics. What Bob and I say is that in the dynamics of human relations, it's the opposite. That the act of giving, rather than depleting me, it amplifies me, it builds me, it grows me. So when you give love, you don't have less, you have more. when you give respect, when you give attention, when you give your time, paradoxically. Yes. A lot of people, for years, I was pretty good with money, but I had poverty thinking in relation to my time. I was always kind of in a rush. There was never enough time. I was always worried I'd run out of time. I always had too much to do to fit into the day. I had time poverty. And I've learned through the Gogiver, I actually had quite a shift in the last 10 years. So that the way I see it now is when I give, and this is the principle of the Gogiver, when you give with an eye toward building value, creating value, adding value to the world around you in a meaningful way, in a way that is unique to you, in a way that only you can do and that the world needs from you, then it adds to your store. You end up getting taken care of. And so that was the idea behind the book, The Gogiver. And then to answer your question, where do we get to influencer? Our publisher came back and said, gave us a 2-book contract. They said, we'd like you to write a book about sales based on The Gogiver, which we did that. Go-Givers sell more. And we want you to write another parable. And not a Go-Giver parable, just anything, just a parable. That's it. Here's a contract. Write a parable.
Cool.
So we wrote a book, which was unfortunately titled, It's Not About You. And because it was titled, It's Not About You, everybody looked at it and figured, well, it's not about me. I guess I won't buy it. And that's
kind of makes sense.
Everybody who read it loved it. It's just that not very many people read it.
In Mexico, they used to sell a car called the Nova. Nobody would buy it.
Nova.
No go. Why would I buy that?
Doesn't go. The Chevy Nova. The Chevy, it doesn't work. That's great. I forgot about that. So our publishers are so cool. They are such great partners. This is Portfolio, a house within the Penguin Random House universe. And Adrian Zackheim at Portfolio, we went to him a few years not too long ago, and said, 5-6 years ago, and said, Adrian, the book isn't selling. Everyone who reads it loves it, but no one's sharing it. The word's not getting out. We think this is a Go-Giver book. I mean, and it took place in Pindar's town, just like the first book, and there were some clear overlaps. Yeah. It's really a sequel to the Go-Giver. We want to rebrand it as a Go-Giver book, and we want to rewrite it a little bit and get off that terrible title. And he did. They let us completely relaunch the book. And that became the Go-Giver Leader, which when we relaunched it, now it's done very well. It has sales are very respectable, and people read it. So it worked to relaunch that. So the Go-Giver next story was the Go-Giver Leader, and that's something always been a pet topic of mine. I've written about leadership. I've dealt with leadership issues in my business world a lot over the decades. My father was a conductor. Is the most literal metaphor of follow the leader I know of. So that was kind of my lead in that, but Bob and I, again, totally collaborated on that. Then Bob wrote a book called Adversaries into Allies. It's like the principle of turning your enemies into your friends, how to persuade people without coercing them, and how to resolve conflicts in a true win-win way, so that rather than having a victory over the person, rather than vanquishing somebody, you make them your friend and you come out of it with resolution together. That's Bob's specialty. That's like Bob's life mission, to teach that. That's why he wrote that book. And he came to me a few years later and said, could we turn that into a parable? And I was like, yeah. So this is book number 3, the third parable of the story. It's like a series fiction now. So the genesis of the influencer was that Bob has a passion for teaching how to turn conflict into resolution, how to turn enemies into friends, how to persuade and influence without coercion or manipulation. And that's we started out calling this book. I should say then Bob and I collaborated, and so it's 50% Bob and 50% me, like everything we do. We just jumbled in there together and started to play in that sandbox.
Sort of like dogs in a dog park.
Sort of like dogs in a dog park. I wonder what that has to do with anything. Stay tuned. We originally were going to call this the Go-Giver Negotiator. Yeah. And you could view it as a negotiating handbook. And in fact, the story in the book takes place over a week of 2 people negotiating a business deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a guy named Jackson, a woman named Jillian Waters, Jackson Hill and Jillian Waters. And they each has something the other one wants in this difficult business negotiation. And neither one's getting it. And they're going like this. And that's the setup of the story. So that unlike the other two books, this one doesn't have one central hero, but two.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's not one mentor, but two. And not one set of 5 principles, but two. And our whole goal is can we write like a double book and have it still be simple and work in the whole Gogiver model? And that was the challenge, the writer's challenge of this. And that's what we did.
How did you storyline this book?
That's a great question. And, for those of you who haven't read it, one reason Michael may be asking this is that, like, if you read the Gogiver, it's pretty much all from Joe's perspective. Joe's the guy. We start out with a regular Joe. In the Gogiver leader, it's Ben. Ben is the guy that you follow through the story. In this book, the Gogiver influencer, it alternates every chapter. One chapter is from Jackson's point of view. Next chapter is from Jillian's point of view, and back and forth and back and forth, so that you're really looking at the story from one set of eyes and then another set of eyes back and forth. And we had to do that without it being jarring, and it had to all fit together and kind of make sense. But in terms of how I storylined it, like how I do all my books, it's this combination of right brain thinking and left brain thinking. And it's just been a process for me over the years of getting comfortable with how I shift in and out of those two kinds of thinking without driving myself crazy.
Do you use from a tool, from a mechanics? Because this one got me thinking about the mechanics behind it. Because this was wow, how did he do this? Were there mind maps that you used, or outlines, or how were you able to put those pieces? Because this isn't you couldn't freeform this and have it all flow together well without having some map in your head. Right.
And it's funny because I'm a student of how writers write. I love to read published authors talk about their process. It's so fascinating. And I was just reading 2 authors, and I've forgotten who the first one was, but he talks about how he loves to outline. And he'll start out with an outline of a book. And once he's got the outline where he wants it, then he adds a little more detail. And then he adds a little more detail. And then he adds a little more detail. And then he adds a little more detail, and it's a book. It's like that's what he does. He takes an outline, like a seed, he just grows it until it becomes a book. And I read notes from Khaled Hosseini, who's the author of The Kite Runner.
Yes.
He's the opposite. He said, I hate outlines, can't stand them. They serve no use to me. He starts out just freeform writing the first draft. And then he takes it and he improves it and he improves it and he improves it and he improves it until it's a book. It's like the opposite approach, but with the same result. For me, it's like I'm always looking for a balance between those two approaches. So I work with an outline, but the outline can't be too fixed because there's got to be room for surprises and growth. And I don't really know how the book goes. So the outline is a little fuzzy and loose. And then I'll have just this collection of jumbled notes, ideas, smidgens of dialogue, smidgens of action, pieces of a scene. And I'll sort of put that in this other document. And I work with literally 2 Microsoft Word documents side by side.
Wow.
This one grows, and this one grows, and this one gets more organized, and this one gets more crazy. And then I throw this one away for a while, and I work on this one for a bit. And then I get lost. I don't know where I am, and I put this one away, and I go back and look at this one and say, oh, no, now it's actually changed. It's this way. So I literally go back and forth from outline to growing draft to try to figure out where I am. But it didn't take long in the initial stage of brainstorming with Bob to figure out that we had these 2 characters in this setup. And at that point, I knew I was going to go alternating chapters. And so that kind of gave me a built-in structure, even though it wasn't a fixed structure.
I like it. It sounds like semi-chaotic fun.
Yeah, it is. Exactly.
So going from semi-chaotic fun, what does dog have to do with anything?
What does dog? Is there a dog? First, is it? I believe there is. I believe it. I've always believed. Everyone has their own concept of dog. The Buddhists, the Catholics. Where does dog come in? So this is a book about two-ness. It's a book about two-ness becoming oneness, not to get too philosophical. On a pragmatic sense, you've got this business negotiation, and it could be an argument between, you and your mom when you're 3 years old. I want to stay up late. No, you can't stay up late. We're negotiating things all the time in our lives, between a couple, between friends, between business partners, between whatever. You go to check in at a hotel, you're running late, you've got a talk to give that night, you check in at the desk, and they don't have your reservation, they've lost it. You and the desk clerk are now in a negotiation, right? You're on Twitter. Somebody disagrees with something you said. You're now in a negotiation. One of the reasons Bob and I wrote this book is that as I shared, it comes out of Bob's love of this topic, but we also felt that right now at this time in our world, there's such a screaming need for the skills of civil discourse, the skill of empathetic dialogue, constructive dialogue, because there's so much,
polarity.
Thank you. There's so much polarized what goes for dialogue. There's so much screaming. There are so many screaming matches happening right now, and so many hard entrenched positions in opposition to each other, not just in politics but everywhere. So this book is about two-ness. So we have two heroes, and we try to make them as different as we could, the guy and the girl. They each have a mentor, and the mentors are about as opposite as we could make them. A short fireplug of a guy called the coach, who's a former wrestler. A tall, graceful, auburn-haired woman who's a judge and who's very articulate. The coach speaks in clip sentences. She speaks in long discourses. And so we also decide that each one of them has an animal in their life. And one is a dog, and the other is a cat. And the dog is very, very large. And the cat is small and mysterious. So we have we don't say what kind of dog. I imagine it being a St. Bernard, but who knows?
I went through a second time to see if I could get, maybe I somehow missed it. And I'm like, no, 150 pounds, takes up the whole space, whatever the size of the space, but you didn't give it away.
No. And I don't know. The dog's name is Solomon. And I've had a number of people say that Solomon is their favorite character in the book. He does speak, but only one word. And if you take it apart with a microscope, you'll find he speaks only in certain situations. But Jackson's dog Solomon, of course, is named after arguably the greatest judge of all time, right? King Solomon. So Solomon is there as a wise presence in the background. And there's a scene in the dog park, as we're seeing behind you right now. Yep. And then Jillian, the other person, has a cat named Cleo. And Cleo is based on a very real cat that I grew up with, whose name was Chiquita, who was my best friend all through childhood, and a cat named Liberty that was with Bob for many, many years. Each of us, Bob and I, had our long years of closeness with a particular cat who went into making the cat in this book.
Very, very cool. And if you don't mind me asking, we were talking about this off air beforehand. In the last interview, we had a dog in the show, or on the show, or behind the show.
Yes.
All of the above.
Hovering over the show. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It was great. Last time we got on, I saw your face, and then all of a sudden, behind you, there's Ben. So we had a poodle, my wife and I. Had a poodle named Ben. He weighed about 7 pounds, and I always said he is a cat who was born in a dog's body, but really he was a lion in a dog's body. Just the biggest personality, most amazing character, and he was our close buddy, family member, if you will, for many, many years. 16 years old, as you're guessing by the past tense. He shuffled off this mortal coil. He was by my side for a lot of the writing of this book. Mm-hmm. And I think I haven't been as close to an animal since my cat as a child as I was to Ben. In fact, if you read the Gogiver Leader, you can't help noticing that the main character's name is Ben. That name did not come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. So Ben was our close companion, travel buddy, and protector. And the day I had finished the influencer, finished the writing, for many months. And I think the very last sentence in the acknowledgments of the book talks about. Actually, I'll read you the very last sentence of.
Please do.
Just takes me a minute to get to it. Forgive me. Be patient.
Yeah.
Thank you, people. Yeah. I wasn't prepared to find this, but yes, I do mention Ben in the acknowledgments. The very last sentence or paragraph of the book, the acknowledgment says, "To Liberty the cat, Chiquita the Russian blue, and Ben the dog, for their everlasting companionship and devotion, may we all aspire to be worthy of such unconditional love. To borrow from one of our favorite bumper stickers, Lord help us to be the people our dogs think we are."
Amen.
And so the day that my wife and I were going to go get on a plane to fly down to Houston and be at a launch party for my previous book, The Recipe, that was the day that Ben left us. He had been ready for months, and he took off. So Ben is no longer prancing around the house in little pooch form, but his spirit certainly hovers over this book in my mind.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Yes.
So from there, what was Ben's goal in your writing this book?
I'm not sure what his goal was, but I'll tell you. But my goal was, as I said, we almost called it the Gogiver Negotiator. Yeah. We decided it was Bob's initiative. In fact, we already had the contract. We already had the book in process. The publisher had already signed off on it. And Bob said, guys, I hate to do this, but can we reopen this closed book because it's not the right title? And he wanted to call it Influencer, and he was right, because it's a bigger topic than negotiation. It's about handling it and resolving disputes. It's also about building relationships, building connections. It's about being more persuasive. It's about being more influential. And here's the thing. Influence and how to influence has been a key topic in every book we've done, all the Gogiver books. It was one of the laws in the 5 laws of stratospheric success in the first book. There was a chapter about it in the Gogiver Leader called The Substance of Influence. And so this is like, we've been talking about this from the start, and it was time for it to grow out and become a whole book. So this is a book about, Michael, it's funny. On a recent interview, someone said, what's the most common mistake people make in interpreting the Gogiver principles? And I hate to say, you made a mistake, but I think what I see as the most common misinterpretation is people read the Gogiver and they say, I love the book. It made me feel really good. And they say it's like all about being a nice person. Well, it's not about being a nice person. Being a nice person is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but that's not what the Gogiver is about. The Gogiver is about placing your focus on other people's interests, on adding value to others' lives, and in doing so, being productive, getting stuff done. It's a business book. It's not a philanthropy book. It's not a book about how to give away money. We've had people come back to us and say, I read your book and I got so inspired, I'm giving stuff away now on my website for free. No. That's not our message, that you should give away everything you do for free. That can be appropriate in some business models. But we're talking about creating value in the world and being open to receiving. So my point is, with the Influencer, we wanted to talk about we wanted to create a book about getting things done, having an influence, having an impact, making a difference in the world. It's a productive, proactive idea, not just about being a doormat and letting people roll over you.
Well, this is so important for our audience, because I know our audience is very much into this Gogiver, give concept.
Yes.
And based on my YouTube lives that I do, they have a challenge with either receiving, would it be equanimously? I don't even know if that's a word, but basically giving too much of themselves and not knowing how to negotiate or what's fair or what's a win-win.
Yes. Yeah. It's such a rich topic, and it's worth spending, we could do a whole series on it. There are 5 laws of the Gogiver in the original book, 5 laws of stratospheric success. It's not just little success, but big success, right? Stratospheric. Talk about woohoo, right?
Woo!
I mean, exactly, stratosphere. 4 of them are really about giving. about giving value to more people, about trusting people and creating influence in the world, and about putting other people's interests first. And it's about being authentic and giving yourself, because the greatest gift you have to give is yourself. And the fifth law is the thumb. It's the one that seems to go opposite to the others. It's the one that appears contradictory. There's always a law that seems contradictory. Mm-hmm. But without a thumb, you can't even pick up a pencil. So the fifth law is the key to continuous giving is to be open to receiving. Have to be open to receiving.
Huge.
Now, that could be receiving a compliment. Mm-hmm. That could be receiving payment in the form of money. That could be receiving somebody else's help. And who among us has not at some point had difficulty with all three of those things? Felt funny because we were getting paid. Is it that being selfish? Are we being greedy? Felt weird getting a compliment like, oh no, I don't deserve that. Wait a minute. If this person that you care about decided that they want to tell you that, you did something nice, or that they're complimenting you, who are you to say they're wrong, you don't deserve it? Yes, you must deserve it because I just gave it to you.
I love how you put that in the book with my pleasure.
Yes, my pleasure. That's it's something we got from the Ritz-Carlton of all places. So there's in the coffee shop, Rachel's Coffee from the first book has now grown to be a global enterprise 10 years later. And whenever a server in the coffee shop is exchanging with a customer, they're saying, my pleasure, my pleasure. And it is. It's a pleasure to give, and it has to also be a pleasure to receive. The reason it has to be a pleasure to receive is because if you don't receive, then the other person can't give. Your receiving is somebody else's giving. So we found the most common thing we hear, Bob and I, about the Gogiver, when people come back, the most common issue people have is they'll say, those first four laws feel really natural to me. But the fifth one, I'm still working on that. If I had $1 for every time someone had said to me, I'm still working on law 5, then Warren Buffett and I would compare bank balances. People have difficulty receiving, but it's so important because without that, the world doesn't go around. The giving stops. Giving can't happen unless there's receiving. So,
to continue this, don't want to beleaguer the point, but to continue it a little bit more, some people may have an issue, maybe even from childhood, that there's guilt of, well, I can receive a little bit, but there's so much going on in the world that I shouldn't be receiving that much. My share should be really a small piece of the pie. Yeah.
I know. There's so many ways of addressing that, but for me, the simplest and the first is always that, it may feel like there's not enough to go around, but actually there's way more than enough to go around. We don't have an issue with food on this planet. We have an issue with distribution. Mm-hmm. We don't have an issue with sunlight and water and air and all the resources that we need. We don't have an issue with ideas or innovations, or we have problems with distribution, and there's no doubt about that. But the way to solve problems with distribution is to become bigger people, is to give more fully. And you can't give more fully if you don't receive more fully. The most generous people in the world are happy to receive because it's exciting, because they have big appetites.
Woohoo! So a minute ago, you used the term natural. And so it seems important to go from that word natural to what in the world is natural negotiation.
The judge in this story, in the influencer, has a thing that she calls natural negotiation. And Jackson says, so what do you call it natural negotiation? Well, Jackson has a natural pet food company. That's what he does. His company started on his kitchen table, just feeding Solomon, experimenting with ways of cooking for Solomon, who probably eats quite a large volume, I'm guessing. So Jackson was busy.
Quite the food bill. There's a reason you'd go into business.
Yes, right. Quite the gourmand, that dog. So that grew into feeding, friends who had animals in their lives, and soon it became Jackson's food business, which is called Angels Clothed in Fur. And his business grew, and it's with an emphasis on local supply and local sourcing and natural ingredients and really healthy and all-natural food. And so he says to the judge, what do you mean by natural negotiation? And she says, well, what do you mean by natural pet food? And he says, well, it's food that is it's nothing but what the animal would want to eat if it had the choice. Just food that fits its body, it's suited to its digestion, it's suited to its health. And she says, right, exactly the same thing here. Natural negotiation, what she means by that is a style of negotiating that suits your human nature, that doesn't feel contrary to human nature. That, in a word, it feels good. It feels natural. It feels like when you do it, you go like, this wasn't an effort. This was easy. I enjoyed this. I could do this again. So, in practical terms, rather than trying, and there's a character in the book named Walt who represents the opposite. And Walt represents all those traditional negotiating tactics that you've read about in airline magazines or whatever, right? How to go for the kill in various ways, basically. And the judge's idea is, rather than being strategic and tactical and trying to figure out how to get the upper hand and get the jump on the person and how to, coming from this zero-sum place where you win and they lose, where you get advantage and you flip them on their back and now you're on top of them on the mat, right? Instead, it's more like how to look for a solution here that's even bigger than either one of us came in the room thinking about. How to, first of all, understand who this other person is, actually be empathetic and get in that person's shoes. And instead of feeling like I'm shooting across the desk at them, go around the desk and stand next to them and look at the situation from their eyes, like we're standing shoulder to shoulder. It's from that vantage point, say, how can we both walk out of here with even more than we expected or wanted going in? And you know what? When you do that, and this is not theory, I mean, this is Bob's experience, my experience. When you do that, it feels fantastic. So that so the next time you're going into a situation, you don't dread it. You're like, awesome. It's natural. It fits our human nature. We like to build value. We like to build friendships. We like to create connections. It makes us feel good.
Woohoo!
Yes.
And out of it, it's sort of like what I say before going into each interview. Either I'll say it to Jessica or she'll say it to me. It's time to go make a new friend.
Right. Now, the tricky thing about this, or if not tricky, anyway, the rich thing about it is that when you do a podcast, we already know we're on the same side.
Yes.
Right?
True.
When you're in a negotiation or any kind of a conflict situation, you enter it with the appearance of antagonism. Right? So you enter it with the appearance that your two interests are at cross purposes. And so that's what makes it challenging and potentially negative and abrasive and argumentative and all of those things, and stressful and so forth. So the central challenge, we don't say this exactly in these words, but the central challenge of natural negotiating in the book is to have faith that there is a larger perspective than this seemingly antagonistic. There is a larger perspective which we can find if we're patient, we're receptive, and we look for it. There's a famous story about two kids who both want an orange, and they're arguing over the orange. And the parent finally says, well, one parent says, let's just cut the orange in half. And that's not going to work for either one of them. And the other parent says, well, ask them what they really want the orange for. And it turns out one of them wants the juice, and the other one wants the skin for a science experiment. So they actually, there's a perfect solution right there, but neither of them could see it because all they could think was, I want the orange. No, I want the orange. No, I want the orange. No, I want the orange. And that's simplistic, but that's a really good model for how so many seeming contradictions, antagonisms, that there can be an underlying harmonious solution that's better than we both thought.
Woohoo! It's a crazy example. I'm not sure it fits so well, but I feel called to use it, which is you talk about a baseball player. I'll probably get his name slightly off from Japan, Sadaharu Oh.
Beautiful.
And thank you. He's hit more home runs than anybody else, and he looks at it as a collaborative effort. When you look big picture as the sport as an art or as a game as an art.
Yeah. And this is actually a real story. I mean, it's one of the things that's in the book, but it's taken from real life. So there was this guy, Sadaharu Oh, who still holds the home run record for, I forget the exact details are in the book. Bob knew that because Bob's a big sports guy. And this guy, Sadaharu was asked, he's a strikeout, world champion. And he was asked the secret to his incredible strikeout rate. And he said, I don't look at the pitcher as my enemy or as my enemy combatant. I look at the pitchers I go up against. I look at all these pitchers as my partners in hitting home runs. Now, I don't know how that works out for the pitcher, as you say.
I'm looking at it as the global artwork, the art form of a game.
That's exactly how jiu-jitsu works, and the principle of taekwondo. Certainly taekwondo, but especially, really in a sense, almost any martial art, any Oriental martial art. Maybe Aikido. Aikido is the perfect example. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. It's working collaboratively with the enemy combatant in such a way to bring it to a resolution with the least harm possible to both combatants. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Aikido combatants, if you want to use the word, goal is, not to beat the other person, but to resolve the conflict with that person on the floor and the least damage done possible. It's brilliant. And that's exactly what, only that's the least damage possible, where the model we're looking at is the most win possible. It's a little more positive point of view.
I like that. So going from there, and let's not talk about damage, but let's talk about wins. Let's talk about, if we can, I'm not going to give away the ending of the book. I'm not even going to come close, because that is that was a twist. That was one of those Sixth Sense Bruce Willis twists in there. I loved it.
Good.
But let's talk about the 5 secrets, if we could, and this is a term that even snaps people's heads back, of genuine influence.
Yeah. So 5 secrets of genuine influence. And it's funny because both the coach and the judge get to this in their own way. But the first one is, I'll have to get this book open so I get the wording exactly right. But the first one is basically to master your emotions. It's kind of the where everything else comes from. It's the foundation of all successful natural negotiation, and all successful influence is put your emotions to the side, master your emotions. And what we mean by master your emotions is not to be ruled by logic and to be cold. And people often hear this at first, this master your emotions piece, and are like, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to be true to our emotions? Isn't it important to be in touch with our emotions? Yes, it's important to be in touch with our emotions, but let's not get carried away with the value of emotions. Emotions are valuable, but they're limited. Emotions change easily. How you feel well, look at that. My phone's making noise. Emotions can change like the wind. They can change with the temperature. So yes, be in touch with your feelings, but don't let your feelings run you. So in a conflict, it's easy to get defensive, to get angry, to get hostile, but especially defensive. Like someone says something that you disagree with, it's so easy to start to react as if you were being attacked. Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now, one of my favorite sentences of all time is the obsessive need to be right is a reflection of the fear of death. And you think about it, it's so true that in an argument, we can defend our point of view every bit as if the other person were brandishing a spear at our heart. Like if they win, we're going to die. It feels like that. But you're not going to die. And even your ego is not going to die. And maybe if a little bit of your ego dies, it's okay. The truth is, take a breath. The way the coach expresses this law is simply breathe. Take a breath. Yes, feel your feelings. I disagree with this person. You can have that feeling, but put it over in the passenger seat. Don't let it drive your car. And the judge says, if you let your emotions drive the car, then you're at the mercy of a drunk driver. And that's really what it is. So have your feelings, true. Put them on the passenger seat, and let logic and cold reason drive the car. Now that's cold logic gets a bad rap. We don't mean amoral, disconnected conceptual reason. We just mean thought, your thinking process. Think it through. When the person argues, you can think to yourself, yes, they're saying this. I disagree. I think this. But let's explore this for a second. To me, one of the secrets of natural negotiation is to go into every situation of potential conflict with the assumption that there's something here I'm not seeing yet.
I like
So that's the first step. Master your emotions. Secret number one.
And then tell us about listen and step into the other person's shoes.
Then the second step is to do exactly what I described earlier. Instead of feeling like we're shouting at each other across a desk, walk around the desk to the other side, stand with them shoulder to shoulder, and try to look at this topic or this issue from their point of view. This is, by the way, if you master the first secret, it's like you're 9/10 of the way there. The first secret is, you could just do that, and you wouldn't need the rest of the book practically. But the second one is so powerful because most of the time we don't do that. As the judge says, she's been in many, many divorce cases, and she said, I've never seen one party genuinely trying to understand what the other party wanted from their point of view. Mostly we go into conflicts looking at what the other party wants from the point of view of what am I willing to give them and what am I not willing to give them. Forget about me for a second. Forget about what am I willing. Look at what do they really want. Like, does the kid want the orange or just the juice? Often we argue a point and we don't really know. Let's take a point. Well, I won't digress too far. Often we argue about things without really knowing what we're arguing about. And most of the time we're arguing about two different things because neither one of us sees the other's point of view. So it's empathy. It's empathy. And I guess the coach says, what is the coach's way of, his word is listen. It's listen. The second secret is simply to listen.
What does that mean, to listen with the back of your neck?
So the coach says, this is Bob's favorite thing in the book. He always says to me, where did you get that? The coach says, you listen not just with your ears and not even with your eyes, but with the back of your neck. It's listen. Often what we listen to with our ears, we listen to what the person is saying with a focus on when are they going to stop so I can get my point in, or what are they saying that I can catch on to, that I can use in my response to make my point. That's not what we mean by listen. By listen with the back of your neck, it's just like peel your skin back and just soak in everything they're saying without a judgment or without any kind of assessment. Just soak it like a sponge. And also, listen to what they're not saying. Read between the lines, behind the words. Listen to where they're coming from. Now, that's sort of an impossibility. It's like a logical impossibility, but it's an intuitive reality. It's almost like extrasensory perception, but what it really is just empathetic perception.
Awesome. Woohoo! Tell us about smile and setting the frame.
So the third secret, setting the frame, and the coach says simply smile. Setting the frame is independent of the content or what we're going to talk about or what we're going to discuss or what we're going to negotiate or whatever the situation. If we're tweeting back and forth, independent of the point we're arguing, what's the context? And so let's use a simple example. I mentioned it earlier. You're late. Your plane ran late. You just got in from the airport. You rush into the hotel. You're going to a conference in a city you've never been to before. You're at the desk. You've only got 50 minutes to get into your room, unpack, shower, change, and be downstairs for the ride to the conference where you're going to give a talk, which you're already nervous about.
This has never happened to us before, has it?
Of course, never. So you're at the desk and you say, hi, my name is John David Mann. You don't say that because your name is not John David Mann. And you say your name and they say, I'm so sorry, I don't have any record of that reservation. So what do you do? So you say, it must be there. Please check again. They check again, it's not there. So the natural response is to say, this is ridiculous. Do you realize that I'm going to give a talk in 50 I made this call 3 months ago. This has been arranged. I got the receipt right here. Is to dump on them. And then finally say, I got to see the manager. What if instead, of course, what are they doing when you do all that? They're going
defense.
Right. They're getting back, and then they're going like, they're getting ready to, they're saying, well, I'm very sorry, but we have no record. I mean, the more you get offensive, the more they're just going to shut you down, right? Mm-hmm. So now that's the classic combative situation. What if instead you reset the frame? Because the content is, do I have a reservation at this hotel? Yes, I do. Let's find it. The content is about my reservation. But the frame that's been set is, what is wrong with you? You imbecile. I am furious because you are a problem for me. That's the frame that we've set. So what if instead I said, oh, you guys must be going crazy. It is so busy here. Man, I can only imagine. You must have been going for hours. Must be nuts here. Or something like that. And what's the guy going to do? He's going to go, yeah, it is a little crazy. He said, I can totally see it's nuts. Listen, and then you can simply pursue it. Now you're back on their side of the desk, shoulder to shoulder, and say, I'm sure the reservation's here, but I also get you're saying that it's not there. So where do we go from here? And try to find the solution with them. But now we're already in content. I'm talking about the reservation. First comes setting the frame. You guys must be going nuts. I can only imagine. It's a zoo here. What's happened is, instead of making my problem your problem, mm-hmm. I've made your problem my problem. I've taken on your situation, and I've told you that I totally see what's going on for you, man. I can share that with you. I have changed the frame. Now, the coach simply says smile, and sometimes you can change a frame or set a frame with nothing more than a smile. Sometimes simply your attitude, your expression, and your own posture and breathing can automatically set a frame. That doesn't work on social media, right? So
that's one of the big challenges of text and social media with the snippets today. Lots of trouble.
My favorite frame reset on social media is, I probably don't know everything about this topic, but, or some version of that. I probably, there are probably details I don't understand, but from what I got, blah, 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 blah. In other words, go in admitting vulnerability. Go in admitting insufficiency. This is like when you meet an animal and it turns over and shows you its belly. When a dog shows you its belly, or a wolf shows you its belly, or any kind of animal shows you its belly, you know what it's saying? It isn't saying, rub me, rub me. I mean, maybe it is, domestic ones. But in the wild, what it's saying is, there is no fight here. I am your friend. There is no argument. The way we do it is we show our teeth. Does not work with wild animals, because for wild animals, showing teeth is the opposite, by the way.
Baboon, yeah.
Yeah. So don't give a big smile if you're in the wild to the baboon. That's right. But showing your vulnerability is a type of frame reset. And if you develop the capacity to reset the frame, and Bob is masterful at his book, Adversaries into Allies, goes into it as a technique, and it's very, very powerful. But you can figure it out on your own. If you master the tactic of resetting the frame, you have transformed your life and your ability to defuse potentially antagonistic situations.
On our trip across the country, we had a friend with us, traveling with us, because we had this giant truck, we had the car, and then we had a third person which could help drive one vehicle if necessary, the other vehicle if necessary. And he found it a sport, a pleasure. He made friends with everybody everywhere, but he loved negotiating on hotel rooms. And I went into a hotel room because I got there ahead of after his negotiation. I got there first, and I had to ask the clerk. I'm like, how did he do it with you?
What did he say? Yeah.
And she said, well, you have to be in the industry. And I wondered, what did that mean? And I went back to my friend Bob and I said, how do you do it? And what he does is he says, well, if I come in here, if I order online, then you're going to get one amount for the hotel. But if I pay you in person, even if it's a lesser amount, then the hotel actually gets more. So I make it a win-win situation of I can help you bring in more money. It'll bring in more money if you knock the price down a little bit, but I go from you rather than I go online and place this order. Is there a way we can get this to work? I never thought about this.
Yeah, that's great. That's lovely. And you can negotiate through intimidation, and certainly there are times where it works. And I know people who are in their way masterful at bullying, at getting a better car price, or getting a better room rate, or getting a better discount on the clothing or whatever, by simply bullying the person. So does that work? Well, yeah, it works for some people sometimes. But if you want to go back to that person, and get a favor. Also, the other thing is, after you walk out of the store, guess what they put in your record? Hotels, a lot of hotels keep track of these things,
Wow.
and they communicate with others in the same chain. If you complain a lot on a hotel stay at a Marriott, next time you go to a Marriott, that's in your file. The person you check in with already knows it. So you're creating a reputation in the world. You're creating a persona in the world, and that will come back to either bite you or serve you.
Yeah, and beyond the term law of karma, the word that comes to mind is sustainability.
Yes. Oh, that's brilliant. Yes, that is great. So it's like sustainable farming. Yes, you can wrest this food out of the soil, but what about the next generation? Or what about you 3 years from now trying to farm it again? Let's make it sustainable.
So going back to your example a minute ago on smile and setting the frame, the next one in here of be gracious, communicate with tact and empathy was also being demonstrated.
Yeah. Yes. So the fourth secret, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, before we get to the thumb. The fourth secret is, coach simply says, be gracious. And the judge says, communicate with tact and empathy. Now, obviously, we already talked about empathy in secret number 2, which was to step into the other person's shoes. Empathy is seeing from the other person's point of view. This secret number 4 is taking that a step further. It's communicating with them, establishing a connection based on that. It's communicating with tact and empathy, and it really comes down to it's your choice of words, it's your choice of tone of voice. It's in every way that you communicate is communicating in a way that conveys that we're on the same side here, as opposed to we're enemy combatants.
I love it. On that line, what does a tuning fork have to do with anything?
So, Jackson asked the judge at one point, because Jackson and the judge go into these topics at some length. And, it says, what if you don't really know what's going on for the other person? And the judge says, empathy, real tact and empathy isn't about knowing what's going on for the other person. It's just connecting with the person. Often you don't know. The truth is you can try to see the world from their point of view, but often you can't, because there's so much more about them that you don't know than there is that you do. Bob Burg is fond of saying it's fine to try to step into the other person's shoes, but what if they have a different shoe size? And they probably do. So you actually can't be that person. And there's so much you can't know about that person. But that's okay, because, first of all, we're both human beings. So there is, beyond our individuality, there is an enormous realm of stuff we have in common, because all human beings have these basic experiences in common. And so the judge talks about, when you strike a tuning fork, you strike a note, a tuning fork tuned to the same frequency will resonate sympathetically. It's a resonance. And all real empathy is offering yourself up as a tuning fork, is to resonate with the other person. It doesn't have to be intellectual, and you don't have to spy on their life, and you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes and deduct brilliantly what they're thinking. It's really sort of a heart-to-heart. It's like listening from the back of your neck, only it's feeling with the back of your thorax, just feeling the other person. And everybody can do that, because we're all human beings.
Woohoo!
Yes.
So let's go from there to the thumb, which could be used to pick up pancakes, but in this case won't be.
or maybe it will. So, as I said, there's always 4 laws and then a fifth. That's kind of the Gogiver model. And the fifth appears to be contradictory to our purpose, but actually it's contradictory, but complementary. Mm-hmm. In this case, the fifth secret is to let go of having to be right. At first, Bob and I said, let go of being right. And then we changed it, because we didn't want it to be interpreted as let go of being right, as it's not important what I think. Mm-hmm. It is important. And we're not saying you should let go of feeling like you're right, because of course you feel like you're right. If you're having an argument with somebody, of course you feel like you're right. You're supposed to feel that way, because that's why it's your point of view. So you want to have the strength of your convictions. Mm-hmm. You want to have your principles. You want to stand on those. And we're not saying just give up any position, let go of any position, and just let it go however it's going to go. No, that's not the point. We're saying let go of the obsessive need to be right, as Eckhart Tolle said. Let go of being right. Let go of the only positive outcome, the only correct outcome for this exchange being that my point of view is vindicated. Let go of that as your goal. You can still want to be right, that's fine. But for me, what that means is a point that I said much earlier. I said, to me, there's always a higher mindset going into any kind of negotiation or communication. And that is, there's something here that I don't see yet. There's some perspective I don't have yet. There's something to learn here. Now, I think X, Y, Z. Here's what I think about this political point or economic point or our deal, whatever. Here's what I think. But I could be wrong. And I probably am, actually, if history is any lesson. I usually am in some way. So I let go of my point of view having to be the right one and open myself up to possibility. And in the book, as you said, you don't want to give away the ending, and so we don't. But in every one of the Gogiver books, there's always a sort of a surprise ending where a solution arises that nobody saw coming. Certainly not the hero of the book didn't see coming. And the reason Bob and I do that is not because we want the book to be a fantasy, but because we see that happen in real life. In fact, that happens all the time. All the greatest things in my life have not one of them has come about as a result of my plan or my intention. They've all been surprise endings for me. So that's what let go of having to be right is be open to the universe having a better idea than you do.
Woohoo!
Yes.
I call that the or something better. Put it all down on paper, whatever you want, and then allow for the or something better.
Something better, something bigger.
Absolutely.
Yes. And in Jackson's case, it's peach pancakes.
Woohoo! Which you would pick up with your thumb. And what about gratitude? Where does gratitude fit in with peach pancakes?
Well, gratitude is, in a way, gratitude is sort of the other side of appreciation. It is a form of the word gracious. So if the fourth principle was to be gracious, gratitude is an expression of that. Part of gracious communication is being appreciative. It's like you're back at that desk with the harried desk clerk and you have your appointment and you're saying, listen, as you're looking up the appointment, the guy is looking up your record. You say, "Thank you so much for looking this up." You not only ask him to look it up a second time. While he's doing it, you say, "Listen, I so appreciate this. I know you're harried, but appreciate. That is being gracious. That's gratitude." There are, as you and everyone knows now, there are scads of studies that show all kinds of benefits to health and welfare and longevity of the regular practice of specific gratitude. That is a part of letting go of having to be right also. Just have trust in the universe and be grateful for the result you haven't seen yet.
Woohoo! So on that note, graciously speaking, what one homework assignment, if I took off my coach's hat and I gave it to you and to coach and to the judge, what one homework assignment would you give people today to help them?
I think I've said this already in a few ways, but what I would say is this, is in every situation, in the next situation that you encounter where you feel stress or anxiety or any kind of emotion that's making you feel like, uh-oh, take a breath and have this thought. There's something here I don't know yet that is going to enrich my life. Particularly in any situation where there's any kind of conflict or antagonism or where you're not getting your way or where something isn't going the way you want. There's something here I don't know yet. And trust that you'll find it. It'll find you.
That is huge. On that note, what advice, Jessica always wants me to ask, what advice would you give parents to help their kids on this topic?
Oh, I think, a great thing is to kids learn so quickly. They learn what's modeled. They learn what they see. I think a great thing to model for kids is the positive interpretation of events. A version that Bob loves to give. I forget. He cites it from somewhere. Is in somebody in public sees a kid falling down. He suddenly falls down, takes a tumble, and he's waiting for the kid to start crying. And instead, the kid glances at his parents. And his parents immediately go, "Whoa, that was amazing. How did you do that?" And they treat it as if he just performed some acrobatic tumbling trick. And he starts to giggle and gets up, and he's like proud of himself. They just reinterpreted that event for him. And I think a great thing to give kids, and this goes back to gratitude, is to interpret events in their life that with a positive spin. Interpret an event in terms of its learning, in terms of what it taught them, in terms of what it gave them, in terms of what it warned them, in terms of whatever you can find in that has a positive outcome. Express immediate appreciation for that. And they will learn the skill of interpreting events positively, which is enormously powerful in terms of their ability to determine their life path.
Woohoo! Now's the point where I'm supposed to ask you what gives you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor. And we can't answer that. However, will there be more dog?
What would make me more dog?
No, will there be more dog?
Oh, will there be more dog? You want to know if there'll be future books with more dog?
Well, no, more specifically, I want to know, will dog be in your life?
Oh, will there be more dog? Will there be more dog? I think there will be dog. There have been times in my life where I've doubted whether dog exists, but I am a firm believer in dog. No, all kidding aside, the answer to that is not immediately. When we came back from Houston, bereft, heartbroken, with red eyes after a few weeks away, we came back home. New neighbors had just moved in across the street. And my wife said, I'm going to go meet the neighbors. And I sat unpacking. And 5 minutes later, she walked in the door with our dog, Ben, like squirming and licking her. And I was like, for a moment, Michael, I had magical thinking. Honestly, for just a moment, I was like, did I go back in time? Did she go through a wormhole? I mean, our neighbors across the street have a little poodle who looks exactly like our dog. Exactly. It was like a year and a half old. So, sort of the spirit of Ben, so to speak, and I don't mean that literally. This is not the spirit reapplied. This is a different dog, different personality. But dog started showing up in our life immediately. Eventually, I feel quite sure there will be dog in our household. When the time is right, as you said, dog will find us.
Yes, as dog will shortly, I'm guessing shortly, find us as well. So then, because you were so excited about the question, I've got to ask, what does bring you the greatest happiness, or the woohoo factor?
Well, I want to say first on the dog thing. I want to say, as they say in church, dog loves you. So I will say, what gives me the greatest joy? I can answer that question with many answers. Many of them have to do with my wife. Have to do with the simple things of everyday life that I've discovered over the last 10 years to be more and more and more pleasurable. But I'll tell you one thing that gives me intense joy, and that is to come to a point where we've got a topic and we've got a framework, and I kind of know who these characters are, and we've got a starting situation, a premise, if you will, and it's time to start to draft a book, to sit down and just go sending up the tendrils of my brain into the ether and start trying to sort of grope and murkily look for a story. And the feeling of the story starting to come in pieces of prose that are often terrible, but still it starts to come. The feeling of a story assembling itself, it is just the most wonderful and exciting feeling.
And that is a mighty woohoo!
Yes, it is. I agree.
So where can people go to find out more, John, and to find your beautiful book?
I put everything in my life, basically, on my website, which is simply my name, www.johndavidmann.com. All my books are there. My blog is there. I've been kind of quiet on my blog for the last 6 months, but I'll come back to that. But all the books are there, and that's where you'll find me.
So if you didn't catch John David Mann with 2Ns.com, come on over to InspireNationShow.com, and we'll get you over to John David Mann with 2Ns.com. John, this has been phenomenal. It's such perfect timing. I love the synchronicity. It just fit in so well on so many layers in my life, and I'm sure in the life of our audience. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
Yeah, I guess I want to say, if you are somebody who wants to write, whether it's a book or a blog or, whatever the form of it is. You want to write and you haven't been able to do it yet. I just want to encourage you to spend 1 hour a day just putting it on paper. I don't care how good it is, how bad it is. Be open to it being terrible. Be open to it being wrong. Be open to it being not what you meant to say. But just put it down, put it down, put it down. Do it at least 5 days a week. If you do it 5 days a week, at minimum, 6 is good, 7 is great, 4 is not acceptable. If you do it 5 days a week, at least, ideally, the same time every day, guess what? You're writing. You're doing it. And you will get better.
Woohoo! Thank you, thank you, thank you. As I put down our latest book, 2/3 of the way through, we've got another one that's almost finished with Jessica for editing, and I've got another one. They're just coming now. Now that we're settled in here, that's a joke. Now that we've got in here and are getting settled, it's writing time, John.
Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic. Good for you. Bless you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Love being here.
For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the Go-Giver influencer, and begin finding win-wins today, and start writing, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, John.
Yes, I love it. That's great. These conversations go by so fast, don't they?
They do. And it's you. Well, I guess it's us. But the synergy, it's just fun. We're just having a talk.
Yeah. I love the way it's great because I often tend to sort of process out loud. It's a lot like writing on a pad of paper. I kind of figure out what I'm saying when I've gotten about halfway through it sometimes. And so I appreciate the way you pop a question out to frame something and then you just sit back and allow the space for it to unfold.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!